Hey, great to have you here. So in today's video, I want to do a comparison between the Terminator and Dragon Ball Z, specifically looking at Terminator 1 and 2 and the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z. So you have Terminator, which came out in '84.
I'll be back.
And Terminator 2 that came out in '91.
Come with me if you want to live.
The Cell Saga came out in '92. If we're going to say there's an influence one way, obviously Terminator came out prior to the Cell Saga, so I'm assuming the influence rolls that direction. You have a future of humanity that faces extinction, where you have a character time travel back to the present day in order to hopefully change the future for the better to help humanity continue happily from there. So you have machines and androids also who are programmed to kill specific people. So you have the machines coming back being programmed to kill Sarah and John Connor. Similarly, you have them in Dragon Ball intending to come back and kill Goku specifically. Obviously, Gohan gets included in that as well. So Sarah and John are similar to Goku and Gohan in this instance. You have Trunks coming to the past from the future. He's essentially our Kyle Reese character, I would say, from the first Terminator. Coming back, you're not really sure who this character is and what their motives may be. Obviously, in Dragon Ball Z, you see him defeat Frieza and you learn the backstory there. You have Kyle Reese coming back as well and giving the backstory of the future. Both similarly tell how their existing timeline in the future is very bleak, and there's been a lot of destruction and just devastation that's taken place since the Terminators or the androids have come and taken over things. And you have them coming back and warning them and trying to find ways to ultimately change that future for the better. On top of that, as far as characters, I mentioned Trunks and Kyle being kind of a similar comparison. And we're not going to get a one-for-one for all of these, but there is just a strong overlap between specific characters that I would say. You have Android 16. Obviously, aesthetically, he straight up looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So him compared to the T-800, his mission is kill Goku. Similarly, you have the mission of the T-800, kill Sarah Connor. Throughout their character progression in Terminator 2, we find the T-800, obviously his goal in that movie is to protect John Connor. So we have Android 16 in the current timeline becomes more of a loving character and appreciative of life character. He really likes wildlife. You see him frequently looking over at the birds and just understanding life and viewing it differently than the intention of his original creation. And you have him progress from there as well as far as his development in a relationship with Gohan ultimately. Then you have Cell, who I would say he mostly resembles the T-1000 from Terminator 2. There's a lot of different ways that one overlaps. You have Cell essentially being an upgraded version of Android 16. So you have the older androids and then you have Cell. So obviously Cell is the newer model, similar to the T-800 and the T-1000 being just different models overall there as well. You have the T-800 who essentially dies for John Connor in Terminator 2. Similarly, you have Android 16 who his goal is to help them against Cell. He ultimately dies for the Z Warriors and helps Gohan ultimately defeat Cell, making Gohan go in a rage and turn Super Saiyan 2. So very stark similarities there between both 16 and Cell versus the T-800 and T-1000. There's other smaller similarities I would say that happen earlier on in the Android portion of the Cell Saga that have a little overlap. You have Android 20 putting his arm through Yamcha. I feel like that's somewhat of a similar situation where we have the T-1000 putting his arm through the step-parents of John Connor. So a little bit of homage, it felt like, with some of those scenes. You have also Cell, who can regenerate, obviously, when he's fighting Goku and he gets hit with the Kamehameha, comes back. A few times Cell comes back in that fight ultimately, but you have the T-1000, who is a liquid metal, essentially, and his body can morph as well. And if you blast him off, if you hit him with shotgun shells, his body regenerates as well. So similarities in how the construct of those two characters ultimately get formed and the abilities that they share. So overall, I just feel like when I watched the Cell Saga again a couple years ago for the first time in a while, it felt that very sci-fi vibe. You have Trunks trying to understand what's going on here as far as the changes that have taken place. And in developing and trying to understand that sci-fi vibe, it just felt very strongly like this had a Terminator influence. So these are just a few of the areas that I felt like were a strong overlap with the characters and some of the plot points. What do you guys think? Do you think that there was a strong influence for the Cell Saga creation, ultimately from viewing Terminator? Was that translated over to Cell Saga within Dragon Ball Z? Curious what you guys think. Any additional points that I may not have pointed out here? I'm sure there's plenty that it could be addressed in many of the episodes in Dragon Ball Z that are similarities to either Terminator or other sci-fi forms of fiction as well. But let me know what you guys think. Curious kind of seeing everyone's viewpoint there. Appreciate you guys watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.